Welcome back to Out of the Rough. I'm with Dan Mortensen with Mortensen Law. And Dan, I want to go deeper on those that need to get a trust. I think having a trust is really critical, whether you have a home, a single-family home, whether you have assets, whether you have children. There's also health directives. Let's talk about the basics of a trust and recap what it does for you.
Well, Fred, in general, the threshold requirement for when you would need a trust is when you would otherwise go through probate. So if you're a small estate, as statutorily defined, you own no real estate and the total value of your other assets is less than $100,000, you may not need a trust. There are exceptions to that rule. Let's say you're young, divorcee, you have some minor children, and you don't trust your ex with money. They're very bad with money. You have life insurance to provide for those children, but you can't name the kids directly because they're 5 years old or 8 years old. The life insurance company isn't going to cut a big check to them. You need someone to manage that for their benefit for some period of time. A trust is an ideal solution. You can name the trust as beneficiary of that money, make sure the ex doesn't get their hands on it, and have someone who can manage and distribute that money, who you pick and you trust, to use that money for the care and education and support of those children should something happen to you. So in general, if you are a statutorily small estate and you don't have any real estate and your assets are less than $100,000, you wouldn't need a trust. But like I said, in that situation, that's a very specific situation where you may still, a trust may be the best solution for you. But in general, if you would otherwise go through probate, the probate process is expensive. Just the filing fees, Fred, this is what goes to other people, not the lawyer, not the executor, are over $1,500 now. We've got a $395 fee to file the opening petition, $395 to file the closing petition. You've got to pay to publish notice to creditors. That's usually around $400. You have to pay the probate referee's fee to go and appraise all the assets of the estate. That's $300 or $400.
So it adds up really quick.
It costs more than setting up a trust just to pay the filing fees. And then on top of that, you have all of the executor and attorney compensation, which are significant. Those are a percentage of the gross value of the assets.
Now, you mentioned something, the percentage of gross value of the assets. I want to bring that up because a lot of people think that, well, I don't have a lot of equity. You know, maybe my house is worth $700,000, but I owe $550. I only have $150,000 in assets, so they're not going to take much money from my kids. Well, they base compensation on the gross assets, not the net assets, right? Of an estate or value.
That is precisely right. The amount of work involved in shepherding through the process, 10 houses with 10% equity each, and keeping the renters paying the rent and evicting the ones that don't and keeping the property taxes and the payments up to date, is at least 10 times the work of shepherding one house owned outright through the process. The net value is the same, but the amount of work is 10 times more. And so the legislature decided that the proper way to determine the amount of work for the statutory fees would be the gross value of the assets without reduction for encumbrances such as a mortgage. So if you have a $500,000 house and a $400,000 mortgage, the fees are going to be based on $500 to go through probate.
That can be very expensive. Let's talk about the basics of a trust. You're going to have quite a bit. You're going to have the will and the trust. Break that down a little bit. A trust includes?
Well, the estate plan itself includes a trust that sets up who's in charge of your money management after your death, who pays your final bills, files your final tax return, determines discretionary distributions for young beneficiaries for a period of time until they reach outright distribution age.
Absolutely critical. I want to emphasize that you want to make sure it's somebody that's responsible with their money, and also someone that maybe knows that maybe you shouldn't distribute a lot of money to your child when he's 18 or 19, maybe have some discretion so they can make it through college and not get a lot of money. That is absolutely critical. The next thing a trust covers.
So the person that you put in that position is called your trustee, and as the name implies, it absolutely has to be someone whose honesty and judgment you trust. The next part of the estate plan is the will. The will nominates guardians for minor children. It can provide for disposition of your last remains if you want cremation or burial in a certain place or manner. It also provides that if you have improperly titled assets, assets that are not owned by the trust at the time of your death, because remember, if you die with assets in your name alone, it doesn't matter that you have a trust. Those assets no one can sign for. The mechanism that makes the trust work is that the trust is on title as the owner. Then your successor trustee can sign for those assets. But if it's in your name alone...
So wait a second. You're telling me if you have a house and you have a trust, but you don't have the title of the house in the trust, it goes through probate.
So, Fred, you go down by Trustmaker Pro 2.1, you print up some fancy trust for yourself, you sign it off, put it in the file folder, and scratch estate planning off your list. And guess what you've accomplished? Precisely nothing, because your house is still in your name and it's still going to go through probate.
Yeah, so that's important to know. You also have medical directives in most trusts.
The next, next part of the estate plan is financial management and healthcare powers of attorney, separate documents, because there's separate roles, and the person you select for each might be different. The person you want making your end-of-life decisions or your healthcare decisions during a period of incapacity may not be the person you trust to get your tax returns done right.
Sure.
So you have a financial management power of attorney. That is allowing someone to pay your bills, claim benefits you're entitled to, endorse and deposit checks made out to you during a period of incapacity, should you suffer one prior to your death. And your healthcare power of attorney does the same thing for healthcare decisions. It names someone with the legal authority to pick your doctor, pick your hospital, demand a second opinion.
When you can't make the decision yourself.
When you're unconscious, under anesthesia, unable to make your own choice, you have someone that's legally authorized to act in your best interest and who you trust will act in your best interest.
Yeah, good.
Finally, there's preparing and recording the deeds to the real estate and preparing the preliminary change of ownership report for the county assessor's office, claiming the exemption from property tax reassessment that a transfer to a revocable trust qualifies for.
Yeah, important stuff. And I know that the subject matter might be a little distasteful for some, but when Dan advised my wife and I, we went out to dinner and we just enjoyed the evening out together, and we put it all on paper. We spelled it all out. We took it to Dan. Dan's staff took care of it, and then of course we signed the proper papers, and we're down the road. So I recommend everybody consult a professional such as Dan and get the information. That's why we want to put this information out there for everybody. Dan, how does everybody get a hold of you, someone watching the show?
Well, we have a website, mortensenlaw.com. That's MORTENSENLAW.com. And then our telephone number is 661-799-9225. And
thank you for being a great friend and consulting so many of my clients. Appreciate it. Absolutely good stuff. We're going to jump to a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to have Dennis Werner with SCV Commercial, and he's going to talk to us about opportunities when it comes to buying commercial real estate.